Number 10. James Monroe was the fifth president and the last founding father president. However, Monroe, unlike his four predecessors, hadn't actually signed any of the founding documents. Nevertheless, he's considered a founding father. Monroe had a close relationship with the other founders, served in the Revolutionary War, was part of the ratification debates, and held government offices during the early days of the nation. Number 9. Out of the five founding presidents, Monroe, like Washington, was known for his military experience. He was still a teenager when he served under Washington at the Battle of Trenton, where he nearly died from a gunshot wound that severed his artery. In contrast, Adams had no military experience, Jefferson had a managerial role, and Madison was a militia colonel but had no active service. Number 8. Monroe was one of the youngest of all the founding fathers. He was born in 1758, whereas Benjamin Franklin, one of the oldest, was born in 1706, a 50-year difference. He was 26 years younger than George Washington. Out of the other founding presidents, he was closest in age to Madison, who was still 8 years older. Number 7. Monroe was present for the infamous crowning of Napoleon, in which the new emperor, instead of being crowned by the Pope, crowned himself. Monroe was serving as minister to the United Kingdom under Thomas Jefferson. Because of recent drama between Napoleon and the United States, Monroe lost his special seating and had to watch from the gallery, so he was out of Napoleon's sight and away from other foreign ministers. Number 6. Though Washington's religious beliefs are most often debated, Monroe's are the most ambiguous, not just of the early presidents, but perhaps of any United States president. Among his private writings and public statements, there are very few mentions of religion. Many historians believe he was a deist. Number 5. Monroe is the least well-known of the first 5 presidents, perhaps because he wasn't commander-in-chief of the Continental Army like Washington or father of the Constitution like Madison. In his second inaugural address, Monroe even said, quote, "Having no pretensions to the high and commanding claims of my predecessors, whose names are so much more conspicuously identified with our revolution, and contributed so preeminently to promote its success, I consider myself rather as the instrument than the cause of the union which has prevailed in the election." Number 4. Monroe wasn't a great intellect like James Madison. He was a man of action, but this allowed for the two to complement each other. Overwhelmed by the War of 1812, Madison appointed Monroe his Secretary of War. Monroe thrived in this role. He spent every waking minute rallying militia forces from the states, corresponding with leaders such as Andrew Jackson, and communicating with the press and serving as an inspiring presence. It was this decisive leadership that defined his role in early America. Number 3. James Monroe tended to side with Thomas Jefferson, favoring a weaker central government. However, his experience in the War of 1812 somewhat changed his opinion. Relying on militias for national defense seemed unviable. Thus, he reluctantly supported the idea of a standing army. He feared what an immoral or unwise president might do with an army, but recognized the risk as a necessary evil. Number 2. In his second election for the presidency, Monroe went uncontested. The Federalist Party was essentially dead, and considering how popular Monroe had been in his first term, no one within his party wanted to compete with him. Technically, however, Washington is still the only president to win unanimously. One elector voted for Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, who wasn't running, because he felt that Monroe had been a mediocre president. Number 1. Monroe was the fourth Virginia-born president and the final president of the Virginia dynasty. Of the first 5 presidents, all but Adams were born to moderately prosperous or wealthy planter and slave-owning families. Monroe was followed by 3 non-Virginians, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, and Martin Van Buren. William Henry Harrison and John Tyler were also Virginia-born, though not considered part of the dynasty. Such was also the case with 12th President Zachary Taylor. Despite the state's prominent start with presidents, the only Virginia-born president since Taylor thus far is 28th President Woodrow Wilson. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and donating on Patreon. Donations from $2 to $15 a month help towards more frequent uploads. Patreon link in the description below.